Okay, I'm about to do a disassembly video for a Taylor Running Iron. This is basically a clone of a Colt Peacemaker. The difference is it has a Bisley style hammer as opposed to the high hammer. It makes it easier for people that are doing mounted cowboy action type shooting. This gun is in stainless steel. I'm disassembling it so that it can be ready to be engraved. Okay, the first step is to take out the cylinder. There's these two screws on the post-war version that need to be, one needs to be held and the other one needs to be unscrewed. I have a third hand in here helping me hold the gun while I pull these out, because they were a little difficult to pull out. When you pull these out, first thing you want to do is put them back together. Notice the screw goes on the side that has the post. The spring goes on the side with the post on the screw. And then just screw it back together a little bit so you don't lose that spring. Okay, now what you need to do is you need to pull this post out. Set this side. Now the cylinder should come out. Okay, now that my cylinder's out, and I'm ready to start removing the grips. I have a moderately small screwdriver here. Let me see which one's small. Yeah, small screwdriver here. And I'm going to go into these two screws on the back of the grip. These are under a little bit of tension, so I don't want to force them and burr the screws. Okay, there is a third screw down here on the bottom. It's very similar to a Colt single action army. We pull this screw out, and what we're doing is removing the backstrap. You need to be careful. I usually do this in a box, and you might see why in just a second. A lot of single action army clones and Colts do them inside of a box, and that's to capture a spring. This one might have a screw holding the spring in, it might not. So you got to be careful right as this back strap comes off to make sure this spring doesn't go flying across the room. The Heritage Rough Rider does not have a screw holding the spring back. So if you're using this as an example for just a clone single action army, you need to be careful with this next step. When this pulls out, you could have a spring right here. Now this one does not have the spring doesn't fly out right now because it actually has a little bitty screw there. Okay, this comes off the grips very easily. You just slide it off, set the grips aside. I'm going to be engraving this back strap, so that's why I needed to separate those. The next thing I'm going to do is remove that little bitty screw. Hopefully I have a little bitty screwdriver. Okay, it's going to take a really small screwdriver to get this little screw out of the back. I had to go get one. Now when you pull the screw out, be very careful. there is a spring behind it. You don't want to lose this little bitty screw or the spring. That's why I normally do it inside of a box, but I can't video inside of a box. So there's the screw. There's the spring. There's one more little piece in there. Right there. Those three to go together. Okay. Next thing to do is to take off the mainspring. Now, if you want to decrease the trigger pull, that's a good place to start. A lot of guys in cowboy action shooting put a washer between the screw and the frame, and that way it is not so tight. It decreases the trigger pull. Next thing is the trigger guard. There's 3 screws on it. No surprises, no hidden springs. And that's the trigger guard. Okay, once you finish doing those, you might want to take out the this little spring, this little screw here. Now this is another one with a hidden spring. So pull it out. And then see if we can get the spring out. There's the spring. There's the 3 pieces, okay? And what that does is it holds the gate in, the loading gate. Okay, now we're down to some external pieces. We need to take out the extractor. I mean the ejector housing. Ejector housing. Be careful not to burr this screw because a lot of times they'll use some Loctite in this and it's going to make it a little hard to get loose. Now that screw holds it in. Now you got to pull it out towards the muzzle. When you do that, a little factory oil there, there is a spring and the ejector and the ejector housing. I'm pulling that off as well so I can engrave. If you want to pull the barrel, now is an okay time to do it. Make sure you have a frame and a good vise so you don't mess anything up there. Okay, now I'm going to start removing the internal workings. First thing I'm going to remove is this trigger spring. Taylor likes to use these wire-looking springs, and Cimarron likes to use one that's more like a flat bar. In this one, notice that the long side is sitting down on the trigger, on a lip on the trigger, and the short side is to the right side of the gun. Now, it looks like the left right now, but the gun's upside down. So the long side on this one is near the roll stamp, and the short side is on the plain side. And pull that spring out, okay? And it bends up when the gun's upside down. It's actually bending down. Now, the next thing to do would be to start taking these screws out. You're going to take the big one out first. This is for the hammer. While I do that, let's look inside and see how this stuff is fitting together. So the big screw comes out and the hammer comes out. Now, notice this bar sliding out. That's the hand, and it's facing forward, and it fits into a little hole on the hammer. Okay, set those aside. Okay, and that hand went through a slot right here. That hand is what rotates the cylinder. The next thing I'm going to take out is the trigger. There's the trigger. And the last thing is a post that holds this sear in. Now, this is actually the cylinder lock, and it is towards the plain side of the pistol. What would be the right side if it was right side up? So I'm going to pull that out. And that was sitting in there. This goes through the slot in the frame and locks the cylinder. The pin goes here, and this part goes up into the back part of the frame, back in here, and it's all on this far side. Okay, it's important to remember that, because when you put it back together, that's what you're going to need to know. Now, that's ready to engrave unless you pull the barrel. Now, if you pull the barrel, I would suggest, so they use some Loctite on this one. So if you're going to, that's what that coloring is. If you're going to pull it, down here on the bottom, real close to where it goes into the frame, the ejector housing, I would get a punch, and I would punch it right there. That way it's hidden, but when you put it back on, you can get it lined up so that your head spacing is correct. Okay, that's the video on taking apart a running iron by Taylor.